Welcome back. I met Noah Rolland at a conference on the tech side of things, and he knew about my background and said, "Hey, you got to check something out." And they had developed a really impressive app for the Oculus that cultivated focus. And we immediately became fast friends because I said, "Holy crap, this is the kind of stuff I do every morning in my 5,000-year-old Qigong." And so we started talking about peripheral vision, focused attention, and how to cultivate focus, low tech, mid tech, high tech, and became fast friends for obvious reasons. Plus, we share a haircut. You're really going to enjoy this. I think that he brings a really fresh perspective to the summit, and your focus is one of the most important things you forgot to cultivate. That's the problem with focus. So I really want to emphasize how important it is to get your focus right, because with the proper attention, you will be able to set vitality as an operating system. If you haven't bought the summit yet, go ahead and click the button, upgrade. You get to keep this. You get to keep all the bonuses. It is well worth your time and investment. Invest in yourself. Enjoy the episode. No, it's a real pleasure having you here. I'm a big fan of your work.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Very excited.
Yeah, look, there are really interesting perspectives that I think are meant to be had from the ancient world and also the modern scientific innovations that are pouring in faster than our attention can focus on it. And that's why we're here today, is because our attention is being punched in
Great.
every direction. And it's a big deal. So we're going to, I'm going to set the table by saying we're going to talk about the attention economy. We're going to talk about our distractions. We're going to talk about how to keep the orcs on the right side of the keep. And
So many metaphors in one sentence.
I know. That's all I got is metaphors. And we're going to talk about how to be mindful and vigilant. And selfishly, this is awesome because you're, Kung Fu brother, right? Like
That's
for
right.
me, the perspective of martial arts, I think, goes a long way. So let's talk about your history quickly
Sure.
and how you kind of came to this place before we get into the main
Yeah,
dialogue.
I'd love to. Absolutely. And yes, we are definitely somehow distant kin. Whereas when I was showing my wife, she's like, "You guys look like sort of cousins." I'm like, "Well,
Totally. The haircut helps.
but the background's interesting." So my background, it's interesting. As you know, currently I'm the CEO of a neuroscience company. We'll come back to that in a minute. I think that the origin story is more interesting. So I really started my whole career by accident in health and fitness world, in the wellness world. And I landed an interesting job as the fitness director at Rancho La Puerta down in Tecate, Mexico, which was arguably the first fitness spa in all of North America. And in a whole nother podcast, we can talk about Rancho La Puerta stories because they're fascinating. So, but very early in my career, I started on this pathway towards how do you improve overall wellness. And it's interesting, when I was there, I used to give a talk, and I look back at those notes because this was a few years ago, and I called the talk Cures for Modern Living. But this was in the late 90s. So you can imagine how the landscape has changed. Some of the technologies and tools that I was introducing to people, we consider now to be incredibly basic. And as I migrated out of there and really stayed in human performance, working with health clubs, working with performance centers, and that's most of my trajectory in my career, training myself as a martial artist, training as a pseudo tactical practitioner, and constantly developing my skills. And then I had this wonderful opportunity. I got introduced to the founder of NeuroTrainer, which is a cognitive performance platform delivered in VR. And we had coffee, and that led to a work relationship. And then I the CEO of that company about 2 years ago. So in my day-to-day work, I'm constantly talking to athletes of all ages, from high school, college, pro. I also talk, I'm our tip of the spear for our government relationships. I'm talking to special operators and pilots, talking to parents of athletes. And one of the challenges that seems to be universal at this point is a lack of focus and the inability to channel our attention in a way that actually lets us live our best lives. So people often ask, what's your superpower? That's one of the ice-breaking questions people always ask. And I've thought about that a lot. And one of the things I end up being pretty good at is taking very complicated ideas and figuring out a way to systemize them in a way that anchors and lands. And so it was literally the middle of the night. It was one of those moments where these disparate parts of my world pitching constantly I always say I only play a neuroscientist on podcasts, never in real life. So I have this neuroscience background, this performance background, this martial arts background. Then it all started to meld together into a model. And I thought, oh, this may actually be useful for people. And that's where I ended up with the agency of attention.
Love that. Love that. And look, martial arts is a very particular operating system. Literal translation of Kung Fu is hard work. And I think that's going to be a part of what we talk about today, because there's certain things that require training, despite what all the health marketers and all the, hyperbole out there say, that you can't just take on skills and have them kind of, uploaded to you like Neo from the Matrix. Certain things you practice. Not yet.
Soon.
But we're going to get there.
Yeah.
So the problem is a massive one, right? We have this, enormous attention economy that is draining us of our precious eyeballs and what that means. So let's kind of define this attention gap problem, this problem around, the modern living, and go from there.
I'd love to. And I think there's a few different ways to look at it. There's looking at it through the filter of an adult who perhaps is in the workplace and is dealing with a work environment. And those are fairly specific challenges. And then there's the bigger concern, I think, long-term for us as a society, which is the role and the experience of our young people. So, I mean, we both have kids. I have a 14-year-old freshman in high school. And I've come to the realization that the average high schooler may not actually understand what it means to be focused deliberately anymore. They sometimes end up in a situation where they're able to focus their attention, but it's almost always indeliberate. So the challenge is obvious, and it's all around us, as it's been popularized in books like Stolen Focus by Johann Hari, who I think did a great job of bringing a lot of the work together, not necessarily presenting a how-to plan for dealing with it, but the idea that our attention has become the number one commodity in the world. And so every app, and we think of the obvious ones like TikTok and Facebook, we know they're trying to get our attention. And it's interesting, young people know it too, because I sometimes think we fall into the mistaken belief that younger people don't understand the problem, but they do. So I often get to speak in front of a group of 30 or 40 or 50 high school athletes, and I'll go through this story with them. And we'll talk about distraction and how often they're on their phones and what do they do on their phones. And I'll say, well, basically I'm either doing social media, gaming, or texting my friends. So let's talk about social. So we play this little exercise. How much time are they on social? 30 minutes a day? Everybody giggles. 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, average TikTok users on 3 hours a day. And then, I'll ask them, why is it so addictive? What's the goal? And they all know, they're trying to get more information from me so they can sell me more stuff. So it's transparent. Everybody knows that's the game. And it's even Google and Gmail, every electronic app is now laden with neuroscience. And so they understand the principles of the dopamine system. They understand the principles of neuroplasticity. And so they're getting better and better at being able to pull our attention to their own gains. And there's really no way to escape it. There are people who try to escape it and disassociate from technology. But I think one of the things that you and I have in common is we want to be anchored in the real world. I want to have skills that allow me to live my best life in the real world. I can't run from it. I don't want to run from it. I want to face it. So the question then becomes, if I'm going to have a phone, an iPad, a computer, and I'm going to interact with these devices all the time, how do I guard my attention first? How do I become aware of how often I'm distracted? And I think it's worth unpacking that a little bit. We can explore it. And then what can I do to really become a master of my focus? So some interesting numbers, research from a couple different resources. The average adult can focus for about 3 minutes at a time. And so Gloria Mark surfaced this information in her book on attention span. And what she'll do is she'll put markers on people and then they'll survey them on a regular basis throughout the day. So really behavioral studies. 3 minutes, the average adult stays focused before they become distracted. The average student is distracted every 16 seconds. And then we wonder, or we don't, why we're seeing higher levels of, and then really your domain, the litany of health concerns that follow this. Because it's not just a question of what's happening to my mind. The undeniable conventional mind-body link is so powerful. if I'm constantly now in a state of distraction, well, that state of distraction comes with a state of agitation most of the time. And so now I'm starting to move into a constant fight or flight. I'm starting to move into really burdening my autonomic nervous system and eventually ending up in sort of sustained allostatic load. And then we see these high rates of depression, ADHD, or subacute ADHD. So I think very few people I've ever spoken to deny that this is an issue or a problem. It's just so few people really know what to do about it long term. We end up with these very quick, as you said, people want quick fixes. Oh, I'll install this, and suddenly I'll be more focused. But the only pathway to mastering our attention is to have a system that we can incorporate into a practice and train over time. And that's what I truly believe.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. And to circle around the problem a little bit more, when you're gaming dopamine for hours a day, the other pathway of serotonin starts to become lazy and diminished. All of a sudden you have this mental health crisis and all these people talking about anxiety and depression. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. So those are inextricably linked. You also have chronic stress levels leading to chronic disease. At one point I was going to come up with a new diagnosis called LIDS, lifestyle induced, autoimmune disorder. Right. And so we all have, AIDS without the virus because we're so damn stressed out, we're falling apart. And so you have the dopamine manipulation, then you have the cortisol adrenal system and the exhaustion that comes with it. But then you also have the dysregulation of the central nervous system and this, sleep issues and all of these other issues that are downstream from this. And to your point, and this is what I just wanted to kind of highlight for our listeners here, your attention and your focus are at the top of this pyramid.
They are.
And where your eyeballs and where your brain is directed will determine where your energy goes and how your neurochemistry and everything downstream goes. So I just want to make sure we encapsulate the magnitude of this problem, because it's not just for someone who says, "Nah, I'm fine focusing." You're actually unfocused most of your day, and there are parts of your life where you see it.
Yeah, may not be aware of it. So we talk about martial arts, talk about hard styles and soft styles, and I try to incorporate some of that into my thinking, as well as sort of the mundane explanation and the esoteric explanation. So in Tai Chi and the soft style martial arts, there's a saying that where your attention goes, energy goes. Again, preaching to the choir and then some. So I used to teach beginner Tai Chi. I'm like the quintessential beginner teacher. Because I find everything challenging. So I have to unpack it myself, which makes me good at doing intro courses. So I'm able to bring people in. And this concept of where your attention goes, energy goes, now translates into, as you just mentioned, where your vision goes, your attention goes, and then your energy goes. And so in my daytime work, NeuroTrainer is a visual training system. And we do it in VR because we know if we can capture your visual attention, we're literally hijacking your brain. Now, we're working for the forces of good, or so I believe. However, Instagram and TikTok are not necessarily working for the forces of good. So once they have your attention, now you're in a training system. And so now I'm going to cycle your attention every 18, 20 seconds. I'm going to train you into that behavior and then all of the chemistry that follows. So I agree 100%. I think it is a pandemic. I think we are in the pandemic of distraction. And some of us are so distracted that we don't think it's a problem.
Yeah. And we're feeding, every time you see a tech billionaire talking about wanting to escape planet Earth because we ruined it, he's doing it on your attention economy money.
That's true. And he's going to take it all with him anyway. So
and he's going to take it all with him. He's like, there'll be, the King Tut's tomb in the future is going to be like a space capsule with a dead billionaire floating around somewhere. Right. So, okay, look, the attention economy, where your energy goes, that's what flows, right? And so we end up seeing a very big problem downstream in healthcare, but we also see it in life. We also see it in the lack of accomplishments in a lot of the people that are, trying to become more engaged and are looking for answers and meaning and purpose, and they end up doing ayahuasca at Burning Man. Right. But the problem isn't
mud now. So that's
in the mud. Yeah. They're doing the backstroke in the mud, trying to find themselves. Where they lose themselves is those 4 hours a day on TikTok. And that, I think, is part of the conversation that's missing.
Mhm.
Little context is so I meet Noah at a conference, one of these geeky conferences where we all go to and like learn new stuff. And I check out the technology in VR that he's talking about. And what blows me away isn't the fact that it worked because it did, and I was very impressed. But what blew me away was it was almost identical to the Shen Qigong teaching that I had learned from my Taoist grandmaster in the use of peripheral vision and bringing the focus in. It was this
Oh, we
really
haven't had that
crazy.
conversation. I want to understand.
No, it
You
blew me
see?
away because it's
Yeah.
6,000-year-old return path into a VR goggle.
Mhm.
Like, holy crap, this is what I do every morning when I
Mm,
train.
mm.
And this was an accelerated path. So again, I'm a big fan of this type of work. And I want to get into the actual solution set because that's the
Mhm.
promise of this Vitality Summit is, yeah, we all understand there's problems. How the hell do I get out of this mess? Right. And so you have a three-tiered kind of approach to this that I would love to get
Yeah,
into now.
I'll love to introduce it. I just want to compliment what you just said with we think about, so you have this ancient peripheral vision training. I was incredibly fortunate. I got to study with Tim Miller when I started my Ashtanga yoga practice. Tim was the first Westerner to be certified in Ashtanga and really a role model for me in internal work. If you've ever met Tim, he looks like Tarzan and he does this effortless practice and he creates this open space. And it really drew me in. Well, in yoga, there's three different gazing techniques that have been around for however long we believe yoga has been around. One is to focus your gaze on a specific point, which we know increases your focus and attention. So one of the very simple skills is learning how to control your gaze, which is what all of these apps are doing. They're putting us in a soft gaze rather than a hard gaze. But the other is when you work the sun salutation, whenever you're doing an upward facing dog, the traditional drishti or gazing point is the space between the eyebrows. You're looking up that stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. Whenever you're doing a forward fold, you're gazing at the bridge of the nose, stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So these ancient techniques, you unpack them and you realize there's neuroscience in these ancient techniques. And they just found it intuitively. They didn't have to go to university to prove it. So this is why I love bringing these together. Yeah, absolutely. So the 3-tier model. So we say, martial arts brothers. So my martial arts these days is our niece. So for those that don't know, our niece is a Filipino, one of the three big Filipino martial arts systems. And a lot of work is done with hands and then knives and then sticks. So it's very, very combative, super fun, because we get to do a lot of very intense things. My grandmaster, who happens to be the grandmaster for all of the United States, he has a saying, this idea that he's always kicking forward in class. And this is one of my epiphanies, was he would talk about protecting your home and protecting your family, that's the role of the martial artist. It's the role of the warrior. But he would talk about how one of the easiest ways to protect your house, how do you do that? Is by simply shutting your doors, locking your doors, and then, by the way, change out the bolts in your deadbolt, change out the screws, because they come with 1/4-inch screws and replace those with 3/4-inch screws. And suddenly you have a more powerful door. So that ruminated in my mind for a while until this idea landed. And I thought, there's a similarity to when you're out in the world and you're someplace where there are bad actors who want to steal your stuff. And when you are in front of devices and there are questionably bad actors that want to steal your attention. And so what if we approach our attention the same way we approach our personal safety? And that's how I came up with this model of the agency of attention, to develop agency in our attention, but also to really think about it like it's a training and it's a school that we want to become a part of. So I like to break things down into easy to remember, somewhat fun, tongue-in-cheek steps. So there's 3 steps to this. The first is lock your doors. We can unpack that and what that means. The second is look around. You've got to be aware of what's around. Around, by the way, isn't always external. Around is also internal. And then the third is you've got to learn going. And what's important is not only is it easy to remember, because I tested this and I'm just like friends and family. Hey, I got this idea. Let me pitch it to you in 10 seconds. Ask them the next day, what was the idea? If they can remember, lock my doors, look around, learn Kung Fu. We're 80% of the way towards giving them something useful. Now, of course, the supporting material matters. And with Learn Kung Fu, the reason it comes at the end is this has to be a progressive system. So as you mentioned earlier, you and I both know one of the great powers of martial arts is you don't just walk in and say, well, how much just for the black belt? Right? Can I just pay up for that? Because I've got a lot of crypto. And no, you have to earn your progressions. And if you don't earn your progressions, and let's say we give you the black belt and we say, okay, great, Pedram, now you're going to fight. You're going to get clobbered by
Good luck.
who's earned it.
Yeah.
And so that's the concept here. Make something very specific, very concrete, easy to remember, easy to follow, and progressive.
I love that. I love that. And every single one of these metaphors, if you will, are more relevant than you would know when it comes to the attention economy and the fight for your eyeballs, right? The fight for you. I mean, whose dream are you manifesting here on planet Earth? Your own or that of the advertisers, right? Or that of the politicians and the spinsters. So getting your attention back is, to me, self-preservation, right? Like, to me, this is the fight of your life. And at this time, you're going up against AI and supercomputers.
Right.
So you need all the help you can get.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting if you saw the social dilemma, right? Tristan Harris was one of the big outers, if you will, of all this. He was working for Google and he started talking about the intentions are wrong. And he has a quote, I'll paraphrase here. No matter how far you try to focus, you have to understand that when you're staring at a screen, there are 100 engineers on the other side who are working harder than you are. And I think that now needs to be updated to, no, there's actually 10,000 microprocessors daisy chained together into an AI platform that's working harder than you are, because it's not even people anymore. And so we're always going to be outgunned. We are always going to be outgunned. So we have to stake claim now. Great.
Yeah. And that sounds super grim, but to date, there's nobody holding a gun to my head, holding the screen in front of my face.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's my phone, my choice.
We have agency. I mean, we have agency. We just, I think what people struggle with is putting the pieces together. And so some of the techniques and strategies that I'll cover will not be completely new and unique. I don't like it when people constantly fabricate new for the sake of new. It's the organization of that which already works, and then introduce enough novelty and newness so it all sticks. And that's my goal.
Amen. And my opinion on this is, if you look at some of the top influencers in the health and personal development space, most of them haven't seen a patient. Most of them haven't sat or done any of the training. So don't let the marketers drive, right? We are here to do the real work. We're here to talk about what's real. So let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Lock your doors.
Lock your doors.
How do we think about that?
So let's talk about what it means from a personal safety perspective, and then we'll talk about what it means from our attention. So I live in Oregon. It's interesting, as a martial artist and someone who trains a lot, I was somewhat disappointed to learn that I actually live in the safest town in the entire state. My wife and my son were pleased. I was a little let down. Grew up in New Jersey, used to go to Manhattan on my own as a teenager. So missing some of that element of kind of putting it at risk. But so I live in a very, very safe community. However, there's still bad actors everywhere. So for instance, when we say lock your doors, obviously your home. If you don't lock the doors to your home, you're asking somebody to walk in. And if you don't lock your doors to your car, you're asking somebody to take a peek. So there was an interesting surge of theft and robberies and break-ins here in my area recently. 27 cars were hit. This was the headline in Nextdoor social app. 27 cars were hit in one night. And then if you read through, you realize, no, 27 people left their cars unlocked. And some teenagers literally just walked down the street and went, huh? And every time they found an open door, they took some stuff and they moved on. Is that a break-in or is that a mistake? Is it a lack of vigilance? So it's a simple process. Lock your doors. Lock the doors in the car, lock doors in your home. Locking the doors for your attention initially means it's an external action. It means take control of your digital world. Step one. The research on how many people adjust the notifications on their phone suggests that less than 20% of everybody who uses a phone ever goes in and makes adjustment to their notification. So again, we're allowing the marketers to drive. Hey, you got this new app. Great. Accept notifications. Yes. And you just leave it there. So we have push notifications from apps waiting to disrupt us. We have push notifications from communication boards. My team uses Slack, waiting to disrupt us. We have our mail servers waiting to disrupt us. Every time something pulls our attention away from what we're focused on, research suggests if I was in a focused state, it's going to take me 26 minutes to get back to that level of focus. So fun math. I always love fun math. This is just intended to be fun math. So I did a little bit of research. The average person receives 121 emails per day. Some people are going to feel that's very low. 32 texts. Again, these are averages. Say 45 push notifications and 15 communications on communication portals like Team and Slack, for a total of 213 potential distractions in a day. Let's assume you only attend to 5% of those, which I think is grossly underestimating how many people respond to their push notification because of the training of ding, Pavlovi, ding, oh, something important. Somebody likes me. Oh, somebody doesn't like me. All the reasons we explained before. That gives me 11 incidents, curated incidents, to potentially take me off of my focus task. If it takes me 23 minutes, I just spent 5 hours trying to get back on task today. Which makes sense when Gloria Mark then surfaces the average American worker is only focused for an hour a day because you're spending 5 hours chasing your attention. So by locking your doors, we're talking about shutting down all of the digital distractions that you can. And this is a fluid process and it's a practice. And I think this is something that's very important to both of us, is starting to develop the concept of practice. So I like to get up early in the morning. My wife's always said, you should have been the Zen monk. She studied more than I did. I'm up at 5. I'm doing my whole morning routine. So part of what I do every day is I audit my office space in the same way that I look through my house before I go to bed. And so based on what I have to do the next day, I may start with my computer on Do Not Disturb. I don't let it default to where it was last night. I have 3 monitors running right now. There are times when that is nothing but distraction. It's not productivity. It's complete distraction. How many Zoom meetings have we been in where we're talking and working with other people and you see them doing this throughout the meeting and they believe they're focused. They truly believe they're focused. They're bringing their best selves because that's the distracted state we're in. So there are times when to lock your doors, you have to get rid of these external monitors. Sometimes it's incredibly refreshing just to work straight on your laptop or on a single screen. So first, it's control your digital distractions. Shut them down, reduce them. And then think about your physical space. I think part of the great transformation of everybody working at home, which I now do in my home office, is if we don't maintain the discipline of treating the office as a space that affects our attention, they become a source of clutter and distraction unto themselves. So it's part of my daily ritual to come in and purge my space. Entropy sets in throughout the day in my workspace. It's how I work. I'm very dynamic. So I may start the day with what looks like a Zen desk. By the end of the day, it looks more like a small storm has blown through my office. If I start the next day the exact same way, I'm already in a state of distraction because now I'm creating my own distraction and I'm inviting it in. So the basic principles of lock your doors, control your digital interruptions, attend to your physical space and your physical ability to be calm. There's a reason if you've ever been in a Zen garden, and I know we both have, you feel more Zen. You are more grounded and you feel more at peace because there's less going on and it's deliberate. So step 1, lock your doors.
I love that. I actually have a lot of very real examples of that. My office that I'm sitting in is very close to the front door. So I have to hack my environment to leave a note saying, "Dear FedEx UPS guy, please leave it here. Please don't ring the doorbell." Right. I actually physically have to lock the door because my kids, someone bought my son a Nerf Tommy machine gun. And I was on a podcast one day and the door kicks open and I just hear this thing going zzz, and just Nerf guns blasting. And that to me is TikTok, right? That to me
Mhm.
is the digital world. Literally, all you need to do is give it a slight in, and you're just getting pummeled.
And you're off. You're off. Here's another one that I see, and I'm sometimes, obviously none of us are perfect. So sometimes I succumb to. There's a running joke in my business that if you're ever in a serious Zoom meeting and a pet doesn't disturb the meeting, something's wrong. Right. But it's not. So how often do we allow, you look at sleep research, and one of the unsettling evidence out of sleep research, or part of the unsettling evidence, is everybody sleeps better by themselves. Right. There's a time to be with your spouse, but if you sleep with your spouse, you don't get as good. Everybody loves their pets. We all started working in our home office. The number of home pets increased significantly. They shouldn't be walking across your desk during a meeting. They shouldn't be distracting you in the background when you're trying to bring your best sense of attention forward. Otherwise, you're basically resetting your attention threshold as constantly distracted. And I think
Okay.
that's what's happened. There's this state of constant inattention that becomes normalized. But then we wonder why, to your point, at the end of the day, I didn't really get anything done that I'm proud of. I don't feel like I moved the needle. And man, I'm so stressed. I'm going to have to do something to de-stress that's probably going to lead to poor sleep. That's going to start the cycle all over again.
I'd like to revisit that 5-hour thing for one quick moment, because you have an 8-hour workday. You are driving on average an hour a day to get to and from work. And then some of those dynamics have shifted a bit now.
Mhm.
And you need to eat lunch, and you got to get up for a couple bio breaks. I mean, literally 1 hour of productivity a day, and a lot of wasted time, a lot of time in an office chair, and a lot of time under fluorescence. Is it any wonder why people are feeling unfulfilled?
Yeah.
They literally aren't moving forward in life,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah. And as we move through the model and we start talking about, looking around and what that means, there's also an assumption focus is an on-demand resource. That it's just a spigot you turn on, because that's how we turn everything on. And that's also not true. So if you could get 1 hour of focus time, but you knew exactly when you were going to get it, and then you align what it is you wanted to accomplish that day against that window of maximum attention, you may actually have a fantastic day. That may be your most productive day in weeks. But if you're not deliberate about it, then you'll miss it and you won't have that experience.
So step number one, lock your doors on many levels.
Mhm.
Step number two, look around.
Look
What's that
around.
all about?
So look around is situational awareness. So again, let's think of it in terms of personal security. I love stories, right? Stories bring things to life. So a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I had an opportunity to take my son to Las Vegas. He's grown up in the burbs. He does not have street sense. This is something I've been trying to instill in him. When you hang out with somebody who grew up in the streets. So I grew up going to New York by myself. If you don't develop situational awareness, if you don't learn how to look around without looking scared. So looking around doesn't mean being terrified, and looking around doesn't mean being hypervigilant. It means being aware, constantly aware, and redirecting your awareness around you. So take him to Vegas, and we're going to walk the Vegas Strip. And it was so fascinating. So we're walking along, and there's probably not a more colorful single boulevard you can walk down in the United States. And I'm doing this as we're walking. This is me steering my son. Nope. Now you're on this side. You're on this side. I'm not saying anything. I'm just moving him as we go. And then finally, after, 6 blocks, I stopped. I said, why do I keep doing that? And he said, because you're getting me out of the way of the people that could be dangerous. I said, exactly. Now you do it. I'm not going to do it anymore. You need to learn how to do this. And then he started walking, and he had his eyes up, and it doesn't mean you have to react to people. It just means you become aware and you adjust accordingly. So as we take this into the concept of attention, we pick up on the thread from the last conversation, which is how much time do we spend looking around first at our attention? Am I focused or am I distracted? We used to talk about, some people do still commute. I used to do an hour and a half each way. How many people get in the car, start driving, and then have the experience of, and then I was at the office. And it's kind of terrifying because I don't remember how I got here. We can explain what's going on in terms of the neuroscience. The contemporary equivalent of that is I was working, I glanced at my phone because somebody popped up on Instagram. And then 30 minutes later, I realized I had just lost time. So it's very hard to take action until we become aware. And so look around is starting to develop better awareness of when am I focused? When am I distracted? And what does that feel like? And there's some interesting ways to do this. I think sometimes now you have to get into some very deliberate tools. So one of my favorite is to create a simple 30-minute increment day, just a simple schedule. And every 30 minutes, take a moment to record how you feel. And I look at three basic metrics. What's my energy like? What's my mood? And what's my focus? I'm not trying to change anything. I just want to see if there's a pattern, because there will be a pattern. Because as we know, life works in patterns and it works in cycles. So for instance, we know that our whole neurological system and our hormonal systems are driven by ultradian rhythms. They're changing about every 90 minutes from the moment we wake up. So if we can start to notice, what do these rhythms actually look like? What do these 90-minute windows look like? Then that simple awareness is going to allow me to now apply a better strategy. So I can start saying, oh, now I realize 11 o'clock is my golden time. 11 o'clock is when I am completely awake and I can get the most work done. And now you look back at your calendar, you realize, oh my gosh, I normally have the most mundane meetings at 11 o'clock. And so I'm not taking advantage of that window of opportunity. So for me, step one is you have to notice, when am I distracted and when am I focused? So we are fans of mindfulness. Mindfulness is becoming such a rage, and it's fantastic that it is. The biggest issue that I see most people struggle with a mindfulness practice, which I'm going to put in my last stage, is how many people have you I'm sure done taught intro mindfulness courses. People sit for 10 minutes and they don't even realize they were never with their breath the entire 10 minutes. One of the big epiphanies in the beginning of that practice is realizing I'm distracted most of the time. And if I really listen to the distractions, I sound like a crazy person. But that's okay, because you have to have that starting point. So look around initially is an internal process in terms of noticing when are you distracted and when are you focused. And then we can build on those tools. So we have some structure and some ideas around how do you now map against your ultradian rhythms so that you can protect those peak times. And also understand that if you can take maximum advantage of if you get two 90-minute windows of high level focus, you're golden. That's magical if you can pull it off.
I mean, if you had two 90-minute windows of that, your life would be orders of magnitude better. You'll probably notice everything around you changing.
Mm-hmm.
That currency, I mean, we're all broke with attention. So just
Mm-hmm.
that much back is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
What about visual cues? Are you a fan of, I don't know, Post-it notes or pop-ups on the screen that just stop and cue someone to say, hey, what are you doing right now? Right. Just the self-awareness cues.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I recently resubscribed to Sam Harris's Waking Up app, and his app delivers mindful moments. And there are a couple different systems that do this. I think the question isn't necessarily the mechanism, it's whether or not the delivery is meaningful to you. So I was just having this conversation this morning with some of my engineering guys. When the Apple Watch pings me and gives me a ring alert, I don't care. It's abstract. It means nothing to me. But when I get a reminder, in this case, because I'm vested in the process from the Waking Up app about taking a moment to notice what I'm doing and how I'm feeling, it's meaningful. So I do like those ideas, but I think there's no universal answer for people. I think what is one person's very useful reminder is someone else's distraction. And that's where we have to be careful to be able to cater and help people learn and develop a system that works really for them.
And this may be a can of worms, but I think that this is important to speak of at this juncture in the call is I personally believe that there's also a degree of idolatry that's being practiced with the gadgets and the apps. So I'm going to externalize my self-awareness to this thing that's supposed to beep at me instead of cultivating the muscle of self-awareness which is the intrinsic skill that I need in order to become self-aware, which I think goes into your third tier of kung fu.
Mhm.
But, we live in an interesting world where we're straddling, full agency with gadgets and tools that are supposed to help us develop agency. And some of that is externalized, some of those skills to the thing outside of ourselves.
It's interesting you say that. I I'm I'm on this quest to be able to live at peace with cutting edge technology and have it be additive instead of destructive to my life. But it brings us back to the need to be able to practice. And so my practice can't always be based on the technology. So if I develop something where it reminds me every 30 minutes and it dings, that's a great place to start. But I have to get to a point where I have somatic awareness and I'm noticing, because when I'm not in front of that thing or I don't have that screen, I still want to have those same skills. And it's interesting. I mentioned I taught yoga for years, and I used to get these really interesting conversations with students about the difference between a yoga class and a yoga practice. And I was insistent that when you are taking a class, you're not practicing. People are like, what do you mean? I said, well, you're distracted while you're taking class. Well, what am I distracted by? Me or the teacher. The teacher's in the front of the room, constantly pulling your attention. And at some point, this needs to become an internal practice where there is no teacher and you're dealing with everything that comes up. And I think it's very similar in terms of technology. So for instance, I like the Muse, right? Not just because it looks like I'm getting ready for an operation when you have hair like mine and yours, but the Muse, for those that don't know, wonderful biofeedback mechanism, sits on your forehead, uses HRV, brainwave activity. It's a very interesting training tool. And you sit and you quiet your mind, more concentration than meditation. You quiet your mind, you use your breathing to create a sense of harmony, and then you get auditory feedback when you're drifting. Well, that's a wonderful tool, but I'm not going to walk around with it on my head all day long. So that's a looking around tool. That's a tool that allows me to have a deeper sense of what happens when I sit and I'm still. And now I need to take that learning and I need to take it with me as I move.
Amen. Amen. I couldn't agree more on all those points. And the looking around also being looking inward is the fundamental skill set that actually then takes the store back, right? Like takes back the land from the invaders. And that right there, again, is the battle of our era right now. And so would love to get into learning Kung Fu. Hey, quick note to say that inside of the bonus stack, if you upgrade, there is this powerful Taoist candle meditation practice that we've included inside of that bundle. It is from my temple train lineage. It is something Noah and I spoke about at length in cultivating focus by using a candle to tune your eyes and tune your consciousness. It's part of the many, many things that come with the upgrade package. So if you haven't done so already, don't wait. Do it now.
Learning Kung Fu. So learning Kung Fu, and I grew up in the David Carradine age, right? So the greatest non-Kung Fu master of all time. So I've studied a bunch of different martial arts. I put learning Kung Fu because I think it's the one that people just sort of recognize and also potentially allows me to play Everybody Was Kung Fu Fighting when I speak. And that's priceless. So what does it mean? So let's come back to personal security. So personal security, number one, I need to be securing my environment. So we'll talk about the home. I lock my doors. Even though I'm in a safe neighborhood, I lock my doors. Number two, I have situational awareness. I'm looking around. I do this in the mornings. I check throughout the day. And of course, in the evenings, I have a whole routine when I walk through the house to make sure the house is in the right level of closure at the end of the day. If somebody does breach my defenses, I want to know that I have the skills to be able to deal with that person. And I'll borrow from the Grandmaster of Aikido and defend that assailant against themselves and put them in a situation where they can reconsider until the police arrive. That's what learning Kung Fu is. Whatever the system is, it's learning skills that allow me to deal with the most intense stress, the most intense intervention or invasion, but protect myself, protect my family, and really do no harm. So the goal here is to protect everyone. So this is where I think a lot of the really rich stuff lands. Now, what's so interesting, and so let's itemize them and then we'll talk about why it's interesting. Mindfulness meditation absolutely falls in Learn Kung Fu. I think it is one of the most useful tools for everyone on the planet, is to develop the ability to at any time check in and notice how we're feeling, notice what's happening with the mind, and also notice that all this thinking is just thinking, right? It's a very hard place to get when we realize thinking is just thinking, but it's a necessary sense of liberation, because if we go back to the problem is every other technology is telling us what to think. It's pulling and magnifying our thinking. And unfortunately, we know, as the YouTube algorithms, if you start watching a YouTube video and you're signed in and you look at the recommendations, you say, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to click on that. And you go down that rabbit hole. Every single successive layer is going to be more disturbing, because we are going to watch more disturbing content for longer, because we need a higher level of activation. And so we have to use this to our advantage. So in Learn Kung Fu, the goal here is to have some very specific skills. How do we improve our concentration? We do this through very specific gazing tasks. We do it through very specific breathing tasks. And I think concentration is the entry point. It's not meditation, it's concentration. There's a reason, for instance, in the 8 limbs of yoga, that meditation, concentration are separate, and that concentration comes first. And breathing comes even before that. I love that hierarchy. So when I'm working with someone or I'm working with a team and they say, well, give me one tool to really be able to improve my focus and attention, I will typically either start with a breathing technique, something really straightforward like box breathing, which most people can do right out of the gate. Or I have found, and again, a common path, if I can get them moving and breathing at the same time, that is the easiest way for somebody to get a sense of concentration. So I studied Yang style Tai Chi Chuan, and a very interesting instructor, very combative Tai Chi. I loved it. It was very me, very fascinating. But then I had to translate this when I was in the resort environment to something that was still rooted in real Tai Chi, but was approachable. And I found that to be one of the most powerful ways to get people to stop, breathe, and suddenly get to a quiet place of focus. So there's a collection of tools. I know you're a Qigong master, and I've done some of your Qigong through video. There are a collection of tools in this Learn Kung Fu that draw from ancient traditions, as well as draw from some modern traditions. Like, there are great apps to teach you how to meditate, but you have to pick a strategy and then understand, now you're in a practice. A practice means you have to do this on a regular basis if you expect to be good at it. And this is where I think it breaks down. It goes back to what we said before. Hey, can I buy that black belt? Or when I used to teach yoga, I'd have people come into my intermediate yoga class. Big description of why it's intermediate yoga. Have you practiced yoga before? No. Well, why are you in this class? It's a good time for me. Okay. Do you have a sense of humor? Because you can need it. I think it's very similar when I have the privilege and honor of now starting to work with members of the armed forces. And when we look at the challenges that we face in business, and we look at the challenges our kids face in school, interestingly enough, on the cognitive spectrum, they're exactly the same. The members of armed forces, or the armed forces themselves, are most concerned with, number one, the amount of information that's coming into operators exceeds their cognitive capacity. I don't think that's any different than what we talked about earlier. If you're not locking your doors, the amount of cognitive information and cognitive stimuli exceeds your capacity. That's why you're tired. That's why you're breaking down. So you got to lock the doors and then notice how that feels to be able to build on it. That's number one. And then number two, the big challenge they're facing is the long-term pressure of this leads to allostatic load increases in, they don't like to say PTSD, but PTSD-like experiences. But I've had an opportunity to work with Top Gun. I've had an opportunity to work with the technical division of the Coast Guard. And one of the things I respect so much about these groups is how much they train so that when they're under pressure, they're prepared. Same as athletes. Yet in the world, we don't train our minds. We don't train our attention. And then we drop right into the fight. And as a result, we get clobbered metaphorically, and then we wonder why. So under Learn Kung Fu, it's choosing some of these simple tools and committing to them over time with an understanding that mastery is a practice and it has to be revisited.
I love that. I love that. That is, unfortunately, that's not a popular message, right?
Oh,
Because everyone wants to get rich quick. Everyone wants six-pack abs in 7 minutes. Everyone has been trained to believe that the quick path is viable.
viable.
And that's why there's a multi-billion dollar, health and wellness industry that's constantly drinking off of people's blood.
Right.
Right. And, the pharmaceutical industry is doing the same thing on the other side.
Right.
And so this here, what you're talking about is the lifeline back into agency.
Mhm.
And so once you've learned Kung Fu, then obviously your situational awareness comes back. Well, then obviously you have the hygiene of locking the doors and turning off the push notifications and all that. What do you see happening
Or
in
if
the
you don't,
lives?
let's talk about how important the sequence is, right? So let's say I'm learning Kung Fu, I'm increasing my ability to focus and concentrate under duress, cognitive resilience. That's really what learning Kung Fu is. How do I become the highest level of cognitive resilience? You could put me in an environment where there's visual distraction, there's auditory distraction. I am locked in. You cannot shake me from that path. With the danger, though, to answer what does it get us, but the danger of jumping to learn Kung Fu and then abandoning the rest of the practice, because I think the practice has to be sustained, is if I forgot to lock my doors, I'm much more susceptible. If I stop looking around and I just jump into the fight and I don't take a moment to realize I'm not ready for this fight. I'm not ready for this meeting. I've got a meeting at 30 minutes. I am a mess right now. I'm tired. I have low energy. I'm not focused. There are tools that will get you into the right state right now if you can first acknowledge where you are and do it with enough time so you can get ready. We call it cognitive priming in our system. But there's a rich history of this, right? Fighters listening to music, getting ready for the fight. There are things you can do if you are maintaining those first two stages. If you put all this together, what do you end up with? Well, this whole concept of agency is you're taking back control. And taking back control doesn't mean becoming a control freak. It means living the level of peace and productivity that you're looking for. And ideally, it shows up everywhere in your life. It shows up in work because people find you more approachable and they notice that when you are spending time with them, you get more done. It shows up in your family because your capacity to tolerate stress is much more easily challenged at home than it is at work. We always say, right, when I teach basic meditation, intro to mindfulness, the ultimate test of your mindfulness practice is, can you be mindful with your kids and your spouse? Because we have all this programming about them, and can we let that go and just be present? So I think it's the great enabler. But again, I'm a regular, I live a normal life. I am not one of these people who every single day checks 15 boxes. I have a collection of tools and I check maybe half of them every day because I know if I get half of them every day and some of them are very consistent, it allows me to bring my best self forward. There are days when it doesn't happen. And that's part of learning Kung Fu. There are days when you go in, right? And so I'm going to work this Sawali and I can't find my left from my right. And I keep hitting myself on the head and I'm thinking, oh my God, I've never done this before. That's part of the process of mastery. Accept it, realize you're having a bad day or having a bad hour, figure out, how do I go back to my strategy and my practice? What did it break down? Did I forget to lock my doors? Have I stopped looking around? Or when I'm in this Kung Fu metaphor, which piece of it has fallen apart? You go very deeply into sleep is very often the most common hole, or nutrition, both of which I know you're very passionate about. But to think that I can master my attention without attending to the biological building blocks is a regular mistake as well.
Yeah, and part of the vitality format that we're talking about here, sleep, exercise, diet, mindset, these are all wheels on the same bus, right? And one of them comes off, none of them are going to work right. And
Right.
that is that you're a whole creature, right?
Right.
You're a whole creature. And what knocked you off your perch before you hit yourself in the head with the stick
Right.
is a learning lesson in whether you locked your doors, whether you looked around, whatever it is.
Mhm.
I love this framework. I really do. Um, so let's talk about the high tech. We only have a few minutes left, and I
Sure.
want to make sure we talk about some of the cool stuff that you've been playing with. Context under which I met you is actually like super high tech
Yeah.
training.
Yeah. So yeah, my daytime job, I'm the CEO of Neurotrainer. So Neurotrainer is okay. Neurotrainer is a fascinating product, and it's gotten me very deep in this whole concept of how can the digital world help optimize our brains. So we basically taken neuroscience out of the lab, we brought it into the world. We create these rich 3D training environments that allow us to sort of progressively, because systems are important. Number one, we take over your visual field. Now, this is such an interesting concept. I think we really only appreciate in movies if we haven't been in VR before or in nature. These are the two places we understand what it's like to have our visual field really completely take over. So when you're in VR, if you've never been in modern VR headsets, it's like being inside an IMAX screen. And once we have you there, we're able to create environments where we train basic cognitive skills like reaction time, decision-making speed, impulse control. To me, this is all learning Kung Fu. This is high-tech learning Kung Fu. It's learning also cognitive resilience because we create stressful environments. We gamify competitions so I can see how long I can stay in the stress pocket before I lose, but it's safe. And that's part of what learning Kung Fu also, the best schools are incredibly safe. They have strong communities. They always push you to the right level. So I love our technology. It's really interesting that way. It helps athletes, but I think it helps tactical operators. Long term, we look at potentially bringing it into healthcare because if I could get people to spend 5 minutes in the headset a day, I'm sure I could improve their cognitive resilience over time, teach them what focus really feels like, teach them how to focus under duress, and give them that space to, again, claim agency. And there are more tools evolving all the time. That's my tool of choice these days.
There we go. So I've used it. My kids have used it. I love it. I love the high tech nerdy stuff. I love the low tech, out in nature stuff. And if you're listening to this, trying to figure out where to start, obviously you were directed, right? Lock your doors.
Mhm.
This is a progression. So unless you can keep the doors locked, you're going to have problems. I actually saw this the other day. I hike, a mile from where I'm sitting right now with beautiful, forest. Everything's, in stunning color and everything right now. And I learned very quickly in my hiking life that look, I take my phone because we have moose and really big animals, and think bad things can happen. It's good to have a phone,
Mhm.
but I'm not allowed to check it,
Okay.
right?
All right.
Because it will buzz on my leg 47 times during an hour hike. And that defies the entire purpose of being up there and being in this amphitheater of green.
Mm.
And so the visual field gets completely taken over by, this natural energy and, smells and all of it. Um, but my phone is an emergency device only.
Yeah. Well, and that's the discipline. I mean, you've locked to not to beat the metaphor up, but you lock the doors.
Yeah.
So I write a newsletter called Focus Matters that I circulate on LinkedIn. And one of my recent articles was called A Tale of Two Watches. So it's similar. And I talk about how I use my Apple Watch and how I use my Garmin watch and how I have them programmed differently. So if I'm going out into nature, I'm wearing my Garmin watch every single time. I have all the notifications turned off. Now I still have GPS capabilities. If I need to backtrack, I have that safety. If I want to track my hike and know at the end, so I'm not distracted during the hike, great. I have all that available to me. And oh, by the way, I still know what time it is. So I have all that on my wrist. When I'm working, I have my Apple Watch because I do want that curated flow of information. So I think there are all these different ways of, okay, it's pure discipline. I'm just not going to look at my phone, or you bring a version of something that gives you what you need and nothing more. But very few people have the self-discipline and have done the work and have the practice to be able to keep that phone in their pocket.
Yeah.
And one of the best stories, Andrew Huberman, who I think is doing more to bring neuroscience to the public than just about anyone else. If you listen, he's very honest about the fact that here's a guy who understands the science, the neuroscience of self-control. He has had moments where he's had to throw this phone on the roof of his house in order to have focus time. They're that powerful. So I applaud that you can leave it in your pocket. It speaks to your training.
Well, sure. And just good boundaries, right? It's if you don't have good boundaries with time, if you don't have good boundaries with your devices, you don't stand a chance in
You
this
don't stand
world.
a chance.
You don't stand a chance. Noah, what a pleasure. I'm a big fan of your work. What's the URL? Where are your .coms for people to find your work?
Noah Rolland. So noahrolland.com.
Great.
And that's the anchor point and the starting point.
Great.
So yeah, I'm in this because I'm passionate. I'm in it because I love it. I love sharing information. I love teaching, and I appreciate the opportunity to share in this platform. So anyone that wants to continue the conversation should start there, and be happy to impart whatever wisdom and inspiration I can.
Love it. You're a hero. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time.